Good morning, everyone. Lots going on. Protests happening across Canada, across the world, actually. There are a lot of people standing up. Bigger protests than have been seen before, and I'll show you footage of that. Nova Scotia protests as well, and there was footage of a police officer chasing somebody, and they fell flat on their face. And I'm not actually, I didn't see that. I thought I tagged that because I saw it a few times in my scroll yesterday, but I don't remember lining it up in here. But anyway, moving on. Don't forget to sign up for the mailing list. If YouTube decides to take me down, I'll use it to keep you updated about the show. And I send out a weekly newsletter. Yesterday, I sent out a weekly newsletter, and I decided that I wanted to talk about protesting ideas. What should we do? Protest brainstorming. What could we do? What could we do? So I set out some criteria for things that we could maybe focus on, and there's been a lot of discussion on it. So if you're interested, join in. The link is in the description. Getting started, there was a lawsuit. The CBC had filed a lawsuit against the Conservative Party of Canada about some footage that the CPC was using, and they lost their court challenge, right? They lost the lawsuit, and they actually had to pay the Conservatives legal fees. So usually that's standard practice in Canadian law. Usually, I guess I've been told anyway, that if you have something and it makes it to this level, typically at least half the costs are carried or taken care of by the loser. Very interesting. Conventions of Canadian law. Okay, let's get into the Nova Scotia protests. Here's the Nova Scotia injunction order. I don't know if the court provided the reasons for its decision. So this isn't very long. This isn't a very long court order here. And there's an appendix that's included as well. But this is the injunction that is making it illegal to organize protests in Nova Scotia. And so it goes through it here, but I wanted to highlight this aspect here. Any member of law enforcement who arrests, detains, or removes any person pursuant to this order, it says, bring the offending party as soon as possible before a justice of the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia, and the offending party will be required to show any reason why they should be no finding of civil contempt at a hearing before a justice of the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia. And D, detain such a person in custody until such time as it's possible to bring that person before this court. So they're saying that this person needs to prove why the health order doesn't apply to them, or they will be fined in civil contempt. And they have to be in custody. It's very interesting because as late as May 7th, 2021, inmates are being released from Nova Scotia jails in an attempt to slow COVID-19 spread. So we can pack the jails full of these COVID deniers, right? These people who are protesting for their freedom. You can put them in jail until they have a trial. But people who are in jail are being let out, who've already been convicted of a crime, are being let out because COVID-19 might get them. There's a contradiction there. There's a lot of contradictions in what we're doing. There's a lot of ridiculousness in what we're doing. I said on Twitter this morning, I realize that there's no real plan to open Ontario. I know that they're trying to shadowbox their way into loosening the restrictions for the summer, not completely removing them, loosening them, and then reapplying the restrictions in the fall. I think that's what they're going to try and do. But I said on Twitter, I understand there's no real plan for reopening and no way to hold our government's accountable. But we should never, ever again let these people or anyone do this ever again as a reaction to anything, ever, period. This has been an absolute atrocity. The things that have been done to us in the name of our safety is appalling. And the people who have done them should be held accountable to the public who they serve. So we should create a framework. And I thought that we had a framework where they would not be allowed to implement something like this, especially for a year, especially over top of basic charter rights. But I thought that the charter, and maybe naively, but I thought that the charter was the thing that would prevent something like this from happening. But as that is clearly not the case, we need to strengthen the charter, maybe add something to the charter that says, in the case of a pandemic, these charter rights are not suspended. And in fact, the medical officer of health has an even higher bar of proof than reasonable doubt or than a court of law, blah, 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 to prove what they need to do. And even then, they're not allowed to use blanket lockdowns ever, ever again, ever, period. Like, anyone who implements a lockdown will serve double the time of the lockdown in prison. Like, done. Like, will automatically forfeit their role in government. Anybody who attempts to implement a lockdown will automatically, one, be granted a prison sentence twice as long as the lockdown is proposed, and two, be excluded from ever holding public office again. There we go. That's the tweet. That wasn't the tweet. But that was the sentiment of the tweet. They should never be allowed to do what they've done ever again. The inconsistencies, the clear damage being done by lockdowns, the singular focus on just COVID-19 and all other health issues are being ignored, including cancer, including heart disease, including screenings, including surgeries. It is offensive what these people have done, and they should never be allowed to do this again, and they should be held accountable for what they've done. They should be. I don't know how. I don't know the mechanism to do that, but we should have a mechanism to do that. These people should not skate and say, oh, we did our best. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Okay. Nathan Phillips Square. Thousands gather at Nathan Phillips Square in support of Palestinians in Gaza. Was it Palestinians? I see the Palestinian flags. Kian talks about how this is a Palestinian protest as well, like Palestinian Israel thing. Kian Beck says, guess what? The lockdown law only applies to you if you're white, rural, or conservative. Sorry, those are the rules. Everyone else is free to do what they want. So this is the on the ground images of this. Although this protest looks like it's got more spread out flags than this image up at the top, right? Like but maybe we're just not. Maybe it's a different angle. I'm not sure. Like there's clearly flags here. Like there's flags in the bottom part there. What I think they're doing is they're rebranding one protest and saying it's another, right? To make it look like it's not, to make it look like anti-lockdown protests aren't en vogue. But I don't know. I'm just speculating based on the flag, the looks of the flags in this picture. Like, look, there's flag. They're strewn all over the place, right? But it's not there. And I can't zoom in. Are there people on this here with flags? Maybe the image is too. Anyway, I could be wrong. But regardless, the laws are being applied in an inconsistent way, and that's not appropriate for Canada. Rule of law means the law applies to everyone. And if they've decided that this is a law that's good enough to be enforced for people who are protesting the lockdowns, and it's not a law that's good enough for people who are protesting Israel or Palestine on one side or the other, and I'll show you, our press is not reporting that in a faithful way either. But there's documentation about that. So there we go. David Fissman says, thanks to Mr. Faber and antihate.ca for the opportunity to co-author this editorial in the Globe and Mail. Hate groups are deeply embedded in the West's COVID disinformation machine. We should ask what they're trying to achieve, says David Fissman. So hate groups in anti-lockdown protests, hate groups, right? Pandemic of hate. Jagmeet Singh says experts warn anti-hate or anti-lockdown protests linked to the far right. What do you call, like, if this is an anti-Palestine or an anti-Israel protest, what is that? Is that far right or far left? This is okay, but having far right people have an opinion on anything is not okay, according to Jagmeet Singh, right? This is pandemic of hate. Okay. Online conspiracy theories about COVID-19 and protests against public health orders are helping to spread dangerous ideas laden with racism and bigotry, says a network monitoring hate groups in Canada. Hate and bigotry? Hold on a second. Hold on. I've got a tweet to show you that I didn't tag, but hold on. Okay, so the anti-hate network guy is saying racism and bigotry, laden with it. From one pro-Palestine protester beat an elderly Jewish man in Canada. This is from yesterday. They also sexually assaulted a Jewish girl, who I just spoke with, says Eli. This is not normal. Here's footage of the assault, just in case. Is this bigotry? Is this hate? Is this something that we're concerned about in Canada? Not the anti-hate network. They're worried about anti-lockdown people spreading hate and bigotry. Pro-Palestine. Here we go. Just a taste. This is a thread. More footage. Here's more footage. Close up if you're interested. Report from the girl I spoke with, quote, they threw rocks, water bottles, and glass bottles at us. The police were escorting us to the parking lot where our car was. At the parking lot, I saw an elderly Jewish guy getting jumped. They pulled his hair and he turned around as they jumped. They beat him with sticks. You just saw that. Then I yelled at them, and one of them kicked me while another grabbed my breasts and made kissing noises. Then he ran off. So the thing is, it's hypocritical and inconsistent when the anti-hate network is worried about bigotry and racism, but not at the pro-Palestine rally. Right? That's interesting. The executive director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network says, since last year, people espousing hateful beliefs have linked themselves to conspiracy and anti-lockdown movements around the novel coronavirus. What about these guys, dude? What about them? Eh? They're not anything to do with anything, regardless of anything. They're protesting in the middle of a pandemic and has nothing to do with lockdowns, etc. And you're not going to call them out for hate and bigotry and violence? You see... I hope that you see what's happening. I hope that you see that this is not an accident. This is not a mistake. This isn't the police got it wrong. This isn't the police making a choice. You understand? I hope that this is as crystal clear as I can make it. This is not an accident. Okay? Here is Andrew Lawton says, dozens of mainstream media reporters, including from the CBC, the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, have signed this open letter calling for, among other things, the Israel-Gaza conflict to be covered as ethnic cleansing. So these news reporters are aligning themselves with a political position before reporting the news. We're going to report it like this to make sure you understand it like this and only like this. Okay? That's not reporting what's happening. That's reporting the slanted, that's telling you how to think. Make up your own mind. Find out what's going on. Okay. Lawton continues, one simply can't trust coverage to be neutral if it comes from a reporter who signed a letter with this paragraph in it. And it says, according to the United Nations and countless human rights organizations around the world, including ones based within Israel, what's happening in the occupied Palestinian territories is a grave breach of international law. Some groups believe the attacks amount to an ethnic cleansing. It should be covered as such. So there's not much wiggle room on that when you're covering things that way. Joe Warmington makes the comparison. He says, when I see Dave Nestor and tweets of those. When I see tweets of those giant crowds, he's tagging these people in it, in downtown Toronto on Saturday, I can't help but wonder, why is the system still locking down the church in Almer? The safety argument doesn't fly anymore if it ever did. What are your thoughts on it? So he's asking about what's going on here. And he's making the same comparison I just made. Where's Jagmeet Singh to smear them all? And so that's very interesting, right? Jagmeet Singh, as we just saw, is very comfortable with smearing anybody who's against the government lockdowns. But would he speak out against the Palestinian protesters who beat a guy, who beat a Jewish person in the streets in Canada? Probably he won't comment on that. I wonder if the media will be brave enough to ask him about it. Probably not. Randy Hillier says, the Church of God in Almer has been closed this Sunday, May 16th at 10:30 a.m. Pastor Hildebrandt will be hosting a service on the lawn of his church. Find the location at the bottom of the page. Read more. So there you go. They're still carrying forward with that. Another comparison, days after Pastor Arthur Pawlowski was arrested in a high-risk roadside takedown, a Calgary mosque rallied Palestinians by the hundreds. Calgary police refused to answer. Why no arrests or tickets? AHS Media, missing in action too. I called the police to ask why. So this is Kian, and he was covering this for the counter signal for his own stuff, which is good for him. And very interesting to note the inconsistencies in this. This is not by accident. Understand what's happening. This is planned, thought out, coordinated. Calgary, Toronto, this is happening all over Canada, okay? Here's Paul Manning. He says, I took photos of an Ontario lawyer obstructing justice. Hamilton police asked him, the lawyer, if he wanted me, Paul Manning, charged with criminal harassment. The lawyer said no. Hamilton police charged me under the Police Services Act with conducting an unauthorized investigation. The system is broken. I guess he's an officer, and he's not allowed to do that. So very interesting with how things are shaking out in our system. Very interesting in ways that the system itself is closing ranks to stifle anybody talking about anything they don't want people talking about. Journalists, same thing, and many more other situations where the conversation is being shaped in a way that wouldn't necessarily be acceptable in a free and democratic society, yet is being accepted by a lot of people. And I don't know why. I mean, I think that a lot of people feel helpless. I think a lot of people feel like, well, what am I going to do, right? And I mean, I feel like that too. I feel like what I do is not nearly enough. I look at the protests and think, maybe we should be doing more of that. It's one of the reasons why I created the thread I created on Canada Poly to talk about how we can protest, because they're doing everything they can to make these kind of protests illegal. They already are. As of yesterday, they're illegal in Nova Scotia anyway, and in Alberta, right? And I'm sure that legislation is coming in Ontario. Like, again, I hope I'm wrong, but if they can roll it out in Alberta and they can roll it out in Nova Scotia, you bet they can roll something similar out in Ontario if it's not already within the framework already, and it probably already is. So they can shut this stuff down. So we need a way around that, and we need to workshop the ideas, and we need to talk about that. And there aren't a lot of people who are talking about that, right? There are not a lot of people who are looking at the problem squarely in the face, who are saying that if we do X, they're going to do Y. So how do we get around Y? How do we anticipate the Y and do what we need to do anyway to engage with the audience or to engage with the people, the other Canadian citizens who are concerned as well, right? Like that's the real question. How do you gather people to your group? And that's the core question for new political parties, which we had so much time to talk about it and to workshop this and to talk about the problems, to anticipate why, and to actually come out with an idea to deal with it. Instead, what have we done, right? I think that we wasted a lot of time. I think that we're still wasting a lot of time. But anyway, regardless, people are getting out and protesting. Maybe that's the key. Maybe I'm just, a person who says that's not good enough. But I think geography, in my forum, in Canada Poly, somebody nailed it, I think. And they said, like, Canada is a sparsely populated country spread out over 5,000 kilometers. And even if you were in a small province, say Nova Scotia, it's still a 10-hour drive, or could be a 10-hour drive to get to the capital for what? For a protest? Who's going to do that, right? Return trips, 20 hours. That's like more than your weekend, right? Like you don't, it takes a long time to recover from trips like that. So the geography of Canada does not lend itself easily to protesting in the usual way. Europe, you can jump on a train and get to capital in half an hour, usually, right? And so you can join these protests. But in Canada, it is, if there's a protest in Winnipeg, it's got to be people in Winnipeg doing it. So it's very hard to look like there are numbers, but there are numbers. People are upset about this. And it's very difficult to protest in the usual way because they're using those protests to write articles saying, see, these people are terrible. And we've seen examples of that through Jagmeet Singh's the pandemic of hate, right? Like using freedom rallies, the rally in Bowdoin, the rodeo in Bowdoin, using that as an example of people who don't care about you. They double down. They use that to double down and spread their message rather than promote the message that was meant to be promoted with the protest. And so, how do you get around that? How do you anticipate that? How do you, in anticipating that, deal with it and get your message out? And that's the key to this. That's how you unlock this. And I don't know if just doing the groundwork is the right thing to do or if there are other ways, but I often talk about we're 30 guys with muskets and they've got a nuclear bomb. Their nuclear bomb is money and access to ad networks and click farms, right? They've got bots on Twitter that's a paid service. You can go to Fiverr and buy your own bots if you want to, right? Give them a hashtag, give them keywords, and they'll do what you want until your money runs out, right? Like, this is not a difficult problem to solve. The technology is easy to build. It's just having the will and the motivation to do it and the right messaging that you don't get shut down. But nobody wants to talk about that. And so I do. So join me in talking about that. Here's some protests that are happening, in-person protests. This is London, England, BBC. The BBC won't show this, just like our media won't show this. But there are a lot of people who are very frustrated with what's going on. So here's some of that. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in Toronto too. This is Diverge Media. They've been standing there for 15 minutes watching the march come towards us. It is huge. So I've heard a lot of people say there was between 3,500 and 10,000 people in Toronto. Mark Emery says estimates 4,000 people. He says enormous crowd to hear speakers. Maxime Bernier of the People's Party of Canada on a gorgeous day with thousands of young people, lots of great signs, no masks, no fear, so much fun, the best party and demonstration in town. So there's a lot of people. Like I said, I've heard 3,500 to 10,000 live Toronto, thousands of people marching in protest. So, 3 minutes of this, right? And there's more. Justin Trudeau has to go. Anyway. Lots of people, and it's all over. Here's Ottawa, right? 45 seconds of people marching in Ottawa. That's a lot of people. I don't know if this is impactful. I don't know if this is going to change things. Here's Calgary. A lot of people. It's a lot of people. The Yellow Vest did it too. Here's Montreal. It's a lot of people, right? People climbing scaffolding. Don't do that. That's not safe. It's for your safety, comrade. Come down. Here's Bernier. He says he chooses freedom. There's a lot of people. There are a lot of people watching this.
We are telling them today a strong message. And the message is we have a choice. And our choice is between freedom versus authoritarian government, and I choose freedom.
Freedom or authoritarian governments, and Mr. Bernier chooses freedom. Yeah, I hope so. I hope we can figure it out. I don't know the best way to do this. There's a lot of people who are interested in showing their displeasure with the government. Can we learn the lessons of the Yellow Vests and do something effective? Or are we going to do this and effectively have the same outcome? France has military leaders sending letters to Macron saying France is on the brink of civil war. They're not doing anything to fix the problem. Neither are our leaders. So I don't know. In fact, what they're doing to fix the problem is to silence anybody who disagrees with what their proposed solutions are, even if their proposed solutions are horrific and terrible, right? Here's Dr. Kaur. She's responding to the Ontario Medical Association. The Ontario Medical Association on May 13th sent out a tweet that says, doctors support the extension of the province-wide pandemic lockdown and reopening outdoor recreational activities as soon as it is safe to do so. Dr. Ash Kaur says, I'm an Ontario doctor and the OMA does not speak for me. I do not support these lockdowns as they are increasing overall morbidity and mortality in the population. Continuing them is criminal. And then she links the top brass of the Conservative PC party in Ontario. Mr. Gallibo is being grilled by all sorts of committees talking about Bill C-10. And Michael Geist says, Stephen Gallibo has asked if he can name any other country in the world that regulates user-generated content in the way proposed by Bill C-10. The minister cannot, no surprise, because there is no other country that has done this. No, there isn't. Conservative MP Kevin Woe, I probably got that wrong, said Justice Minister David Lametti showed a lack of respect for the chamber by failing to show up at the hearing on Friday. They were talking, this is where Gallibo was being grilled. The Attorney General and Justice Minister decided, I don't need to be there. Free speech, they've got it. I'm sure that this is just a distraction and we're not going to actually get anywhere with this one, so we'll wait till after the election. I've got better things to do with my Friday afternoon, said Lametti. He's going to drive that fancy car he's got, right? That convertible? It was a Corvette, maybe? I can't remember. I'll have to, I'm going to go look at it. I'm going to go look. I can't find it. A couple of years ago, when he was made the Attorney General, there was images of him with a Corvette or something like that, a red Corvette. So I thought that would be funny. But anyway, moving on. China, apparently the Minister of Transport approved Chinese fighter pilot training in Canadian airspace. I'm just not shocked, right? After hearing about all the other training of Chinese troops on Canadian soil. This one doesn't surprise me at all. It's a Rebel News exclusive, so check that one out. Link is in the description. We'll talk about travel restrictions, and then we'll move over to Redacted for just the end of the show. Seems kind of like a short version today, but that's okay. These things happen sometimes. Rolled through an RCMP COVID-19 roadblock on the Coke yesterday. They love intimidation factor. Do they need to be brandishing their carbines? Now, aren't these AR-15s that he's got? Isn't that an AR-15 that he's holding like that? I could be wrong. I'm not a gun guy. But I'm pretty sure that AR-15 is standard issue for Canadian police. And aren't those militarized weapons on Canadian streets? What were these guys expecting? ISIS in a Toyota? You never know these days, guys, but that's concerning, right? Travel restrictions happening. Trudeau government begins work on reopening the U.S.-Canada border. That's May 14th. Today's the 16th. That seems... It seems a little ominous because I think that they're going to try for the passport, but it also seems like the United States is opening regardless of what anybody says. Biden stopped wearing a mask. The CDC has issued mask guidelines. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But it seems like Canada is going to be dragged over that line one way or the other. And if the U.S. doesn't go with passports of some kind, like COVID-19 vaccination status passports, I think Canada won't be able to, but won't be able to, but it won't be something. If the US isn't demanding it and Canada is for some reason, that is going to not fly well with people who travel in and out of the US. There have been people who say, oh, get used to it. You know, this is coming. It's going to happen. Australia's made noises about this. New Zealand's made noises about this. The EU rejected this. France rejected this. And the United States is kind of wishy-washy on it right now. But the CDC recommendations, there's one school of thought. There's two schools of thoughts. One school of thought is the CDC recommendation was to get them checking what the status was. So it was a bad move. But the other school of thought is the longer this goes on, the less likely people are going to be checking the status of people entering and leaving their stores. So I don't know one way or the other, but it seems like things are loosening up, changing one way or the other. The other thing I wanted to mention, I talked yesterday about how Walmart ended the mask mandate. That's in the US. But yeah, that's a big deal, right? Like, because initially a lot of people were thinking that the government was going to allow the corporations to put in this de facto rule, right? It wouldn't be mandatory outside, but all of these different stores are going to mandate this mask. And so it'll be a de facto rule, right? That's the rules according to Joe Biden. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to fly. I don't think it will. But now that Walmart has repealed the mask mandate, it looks like, and then Walmart's very influential. If Walmart's not doing it, good luck. So we'll see. We'll see how it all unfolds. I don't know at this point how, I mean, who could know? Who could know? Who could predict this 6 months ago, right? I mean, I guess still in lockdown? Shock, right? Like if I were to tell November me, they're lying about the lockdown. It's not 2 weeks to flatten the curve. I'd be like, I thought that. Anyway, Canada will reopen the border to non-essential travel. In a letter to the White House, a New York congressman urged Joe Biden to directly engage with Justin Trudeau to discuss efforts to fully reopen the border by early July. That seems like great. That seems great, like great news, honestly. If that happens, I will be glad to be wrong. I will be embracing people's ability to non-essentially go over the border. I might go to Seneca Casino just to have a poker game in the U.S. just to say that I did it. Because, you know, it's important, I think, to be able to do that, to make that choice, to have that freedom, right? It would be a kind of a pain in the butt, though. It'd be a lot of driving to spend $100 at the poker table. I'm an okay player. It's not that bad. Anyway, I would. That would be good news. But I think that the July promise of this tasty-looking carrot, I might get just disappointed again. You know, like, oh, you said we were going to reopen fully, and by reopen fully, you meant for vaccinated people, or, you know, some other horrific inversion of what we think they mean by these statements, right? Yeah. Okay, we're going to go over to the Redacted show now, and thanks for watching, everybody. Check out the rest of the show on BitChute or Odysee or Rumble, and check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.